What if the best way to stop trembling was to try as hard as you possibly could to tremble even more? Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived 4 Nazi concentration camps and built one of the most influential schools of psychotherapy of the 20th century, would say yes, and he would have clinical evidence to back it up. The technique he developed is called paradoxical intention, and it remains one of the most counterintuitive, elegant, and genuinely effective tools in the history of psychology. To understand why it works, you first have to understand the trap it is designed to escape. Frankl observed that anxiety is not merely a response to danger, it is also a cause of it. When a person fears a symptom, whether it is a racing heart, a stammer, a blush, or a sleepless night, that fear creates what he called anticipatory anxiety. The person begins to watch themselves, bracing for the dreaded event. And that very act of watching, that hyperattention turned inward, is precisely what triggers the symptom. Fear of not sleeping keeps you awake. Fear of blushing floods your face with heat. Fear of failing the performance makes your hand shake. The symptom and the fear feed each other in a loop, and every conventional strategy, try harder, relax, just breathe, only tightens the grip. Frankl saw this pattern with extraordinary clarity during his years in the camps, where men and women lived under conditions of absolute terror. He noticed that those who became consumed by their fear of death, who thought of nothing else, often deteriorated fastest. But those who found a way to step outside their terror, to hold it at arm's length, even to joke about it, retained something essential: the capacity to act, to endure, to remain human. He began to theorize that the distance created by humor and by intentional exaggeration was not merely a coping mechanism but a fundamental act of freedom. In his clinical practice after the war, Frankl formalized this insight into paradoxical intention. The technique is simple in form, though it demands real courage to apply. When a patient suffers from a fear, Frankl instructs them to intend, or even wish for, the very thing they dread. A man who fears he will sweat uncontrollably in a meeting is told to go into that meeting and try to produce the most spectacular sweat-soaked performance anyone has ever seen. A woman who cannot fall asleep because she is anxious about not sleeping is told to try to stay awake as long as possible. The result, in case after case documented in Frankl's writings, is that the symptom dissolves. It cannot survive the deliberate gaze. What was involuntary becomes voluntary, and what is voluntary loses its power to terrify. There is a clinical case Frankl returned to repeatedly to illustrate this technique. A young physician came to him suffering from a fear that had ruined his professional life. He was convinced that he sweated excessively whenever he encountered a superior. The anticipation of sweating made him sweat, which confirmed his fear, which deepened his dread. Frankl instructed him that the next time he encountered someone he feared, he was to say to himself, deliberately and even with a touch of dark humor, "I only sweated a quart before, so now I'll sweat at least 10 quarts. The young man tried it. The sweating stopped almost immediately. By intending the symptom, he removed the anxiety that was producing it. The reason this works is rooted in what Frankl understood about the structure of human consciousness. We are not our symptoms. We are not even our fears. We are beings capable of taking a position toward our own condition, what Frankl called the noutic dimension, the uniquely human capacity for self-detachment and self-transcendence. Paradoxical intention works because it activates exactly this capacity. The moment a person can stand apart from their fear and even laugh at it, they have reasserted the freedom of the human spirit over the automatism of the nervous system. Today, paradoxical intention is embedded in several modern therapeutic approaches, including elements of acceptance and commitment therapy and certain cognitive behavioral protocols for insomnia and performance anxiety. But in the culture at large, we remain deeply committed to the opposite strategy. We are told to fight anxiety, suppress it, breathe it away, think positively over it. Social media is saturated with advice to simply not think about what scares you. Frankl would have recognized this well-meaning counsel as a prescription for the very trap it claims to cure. Consider how this applies to the anxiety epidemic among young people today. A student terrified of failing an exam concentrates so intensely on the possibility of failure that the anxiety itself impairs their recall. A person afraid of awkward silences in conversation monitors themselves so relentlessly that they fall mute. In each case, the solution Frankl offers is the same. Stop fleeing the fear and turn toward it with intention, even with humor. Wish for the worst. Exaggerate it past the point of plausibility. Watch what happens when the spotlight shifts from the symptom to the act of intending it. This is not nihilism or fatalism. It is the deepest kind of optimism, the conviction that human beings possess, even in their most desperate moments, a freedom no circumstance can remove. the freedom to choose our attitude, the freedom to step back from the mechanics of our own fear and see them for what they are, not fate, but habit, not destiny, but a loop that can be broken. Paradoxical intention is one of Frankl's gifts to anyone willing to try it. It asks nothing except the courage to face what you have been fleeing, and to meet it not with despair, but with the liberating absurdity of intention. Subscribe to the Psychology of Viktor Frankl to explore more of his timeless ideas.